The sun hung high over the wide plains, burning hot against the earth until the ground itself seemed to tremble with heat. The cicadas whined their endless song, and the sky above was a hard, pitiless blue. On such days, when even the horses drooped their heads and the cattle wandered slow, Elias Boone rode alone. His was not a rancher's errand of cheer, but one of routine, checking fence lines, mending where the prairie wind had torn loose planks, counting water troughs in silence. Elias had long grown accustomed to silence, and though the world around him was full of noise, the rush of grass when the wind leaned heavy, the creak of leather as his saddle moved, the rattling cry of distant crows, he carried within him a hush so deep it had come to feel like home. He was 34, broad-shouldered, with hair darkened by sun and wind, and a face that looked older than his years, not for want of strength, but from the weight of things unspoken. Elias Boone was known in town, though not much was said to his face. Men greeted him in nods, women in quick glances, for he was steady, reliable, and apart. He owned a spread of land that fed him enough to live, and though there was space for laughter and family, those things had long ago fled. The story of the fiancée he lost had settled into rumor like dust. Some said sickness, some said a river accident, but none dared ask Elias directly. He was a man carved out of grief, still standing because he had nowhere else to fall. It was on this day, riding home with reins loose in his hands, that he saw her. At first, she was no more than a shape on the dirt road, cast against the raw light of afternoon, half hidden beside the remains of a collapsed fence. He slowed his horse, squinting. The shape moved barely, and that small motion pierced the haze of indifference that often cloaked him. Sliding from his saddle, he walked closer, boots sinking in dust, the leather of his belt creaking with every step. And then he stopped cold. A woman lay there, her dress torn, her body marked with cruel blows. Her face was turned half toward the earth, hair matted with blood and sweat. Beside her, nestled in scraps of cloth, lay two newborns, their cries so faint they sounded like whispers, as though even they feared the world too much to raise their voices. Elias dropped to his knees before he even knew he had moved. "Lord above," he whispered, his throat tight. His calloused hand hovered uncertain, afraid of breaking what was left of her. The woman's chest rose and fell with fragile breaths, each one a battle. Her arms curled around the infants, as though even in near death she fought to shield them. Elias pressed his palm against her cheek. Warm but weak, her lips moved, and he bent close to hear. "Don't take them," the words were faint, the rasp of someone on the edge of leaving the world. "I ain't takin' Elias murmured, his voice rough with an ache he did not expect. "I'm keepin' 'em safe." There are moments when a man does not weigh the choice before him, does not measure consequence, does not pause to ask whether he is fit for what he takes on. In that moment, Elias only knew he could not leave her. He gathered the woman into his arms, careful of her brokenness, and with his other hand lifted the bundle that held her children. His horse, a patient bay, shifted but did not protest when Elias climbed back into the saddle with his heavy load. He rode hard for home, dust trailing like smoke behind him. The Boone Ranch was not a place meant for guests. It stood solitary against the horizon, a cabin of pine logs darkened by time, its porch worn smooth by years of weather. Inside, the air carried the smell of wood smoke and leather, simple living, no touch of softness. Elias had kept it neat out of habit, but it was the neatness of someone who expected no visitor to disturb the order. Now, carrying her across the threshold, the cabin felt foreign, as though he had stepped into another man's life. He laid her gently upon his bed, the only one in the house, then turned his attention to the infants. Their tiny fists opened and closed as they squirmed, their cries rising a little stronger. Elias fumbled, searching his shelves for anything that might serve. He found an old jug of milk meant for his coffee, and poured some into a pan, warming it over the stove. With strips of cloth torn from his own shirt, he fashioned makeshift swaddles. His big hands, more used to rope and hammer, shook as he guided the milk into their mouths, tilting with care. The woman stirred, opening her eyes for the briefest moment. They were pale blue, like the sky when storm threatens, and they searched him with confusion and fear. "You're safe," Elias said softly, kneeling beside her. "I found you out on the road. Brought you here." She tried to speak, but coughed instead, pain shuddering through her body. He fetched water, pressed it to her lips, and she drank with trembling effort. Her gaze flicked to the babies, then back to him, sharp with worry. "They're all right," Elias assured. "They're fed warm. You rest now." Her eyelids fluttered closed, and though he feared it was forever, her breathing steadied into a shallow rhythm. He sat beside her for hours, listening to the wind batter against the cabin walls, the twins' small sounds, and his own thoughts, which rose and fell like waves against a shore he had long abandoned. Something had entered his life without asking permission, something fragile and desperate, and though part of him wanted to turn away, a deeper part knew he never could. By morning, the town had already begun to talk. News traveled quick in places where little else stirred. In the saloon, men leaned against the bar, spitting tobacco juice and laughing sharp. Boone's took in that ruined girl and her brats, one said, the words dripping contempt. Women in bonnets and shawls whispered behind their hands as they passed the mercantile. Some claimed she had brought her fate upon herself, that no decent woman ended up half dead on a roadside with twins unless shame lay behind it. Others shook their heads in pity, though even pity carried judgment in its shadow. Elias heard some of it when he rode in for supplies. He kept his hat low, jaw set, his silence louder than words. When one man muttered too close, Elias paused long enough to meet his eye. The man fell quiet under that steady stare, looking away as if burned. Elias bought milk, bandages, cloth, and left without a word. He had no interest in changing their minds. His concern lay back at the cabin, where the woman, Clara May, he would learn her name later, struggled between life and death. That night, while the wind rattled the shutters, Clara stirred awake fully for the first time. She tried to sit, but fell back, grimacing at the pain. Elias was at her side before she could speak. "You shouldn't have kept me," she whispered, voice raw. "Folks'll think less of you." Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his face rough with stubble and fatigue. "Let 'em think what they please. Ain't their voices keep you alive?" Her eyes filled, not with gratitude, but with shame so deep it seemed to hollow her from within. She turned her face away, silent tears slipping into her hair. Elias did not press her. He simply stayed, a presence steady as stone, through the long, dark hours. Days passed. Elias tended to her wounds with hands that trembled but never faltered. He cleaned, dressed, soothed, fetching water, feeding twins in the quiet hours of dawn. He built a cradle from spare wood scraps, sanding it smooth late into the night. When Clara was strong enough to notice, her tears came anew. "No one's ever made something for me," she said softly, fingers brushing the edge of the cradle as though it were a miracle. Elias only shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Babes need a place to rest proper. That's all. Yet in her eyes, he saw it meant more. Around the campfire one evening, Clara told him her truth. Voice breaking, she spoke of betrayal, of being cast out, of the cruel hands that had beaten her and left her for dead. She spoke of shame pressed upon her by others, how the town turned its back, how she had been told she was ruined, unfit to live among them. She trembled, waiting for disgust to twist his features. Instead, Elias stared into the fire, his face shadowed by flame, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet. "You ain't ruined, Clara. You're still here. That's more than most." For a long moment, neither spoke further. The fire crackled, the twins breathed softly in their cradle, and in that silence something shifted. It was not love declared, nor even friendship spoken, but recognition, the kind that roots itself deeper than words. But peace is fragile in the West, and cruelty does not always leave when ignored. Word reached Elias that the man responsible for Clara's suffering, the wealthy son of a ranch owner, had taken offense at Boone's defiance. He would come, they said, to finish what he started. Clara panicked at the news, begging Elias to let her leave, to spare him. Elias refused, his jaw set like iron. "You ain't alone in this fight no more," he told her. The tension grew heavy, like storm clouds gathering. On Sunday, Elias brought Clara to church. The room hushed as they entered, every eye turning. Murmurs rippled like wind through grass. Clara shrank back, but Elias placed his hat gently on her head, a gesture so simple yet so public it sent a shock through the room. She stared at him, bewildered, while judgment burned around them. Afterward, she asked why. "Sometimes a man's got to stand where it hurts most," he said, "so someone else don't have to." The day of reckoning came at dusk, when the guilty man and his crew rode up to Boone's ranch. Dust curled from their horses' hooves, faces hard with arrogance. They demanded Clara. Elias stepped onto his porch, rifle in hand, though he did not raise it. His voice was calm, steady, like the ground beneath their feet. "You'll not touch her, nor those babes. Not while I draw breath." For a moment, violence trembled in the air, sharp as lightning before it strikes. But something in Elias' stance, unyielding, willing to pay the price, made them falter. They cursed, spat, and rode off, leaving the ranch in silence. Elias lowered his rifle slowly, his breath finally shuddering free. Clara stood in the doorway, tears streaking her face. He turned to her, words caught in his throat. For years he had spoken to no one of his heart, burying it beneath soil and stone. But now it rose, unbidden. "I thought my heart was buried with her," he said hoarsely. "But you brought it back." He stepped closer, rough hands trembling. "Clara May, I don't have fine words nor much to offer beyond this land and my name. But if you'll have me, I'll spend every breath making sure you and them babes are never left alone again. Will you be my wife?" Clara pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing softly, then nodded through tears. "Yes," she whispered, voice breaking. "Yes." The twins stirred in their cradle. The wind sighed across the plains, and for the first time in years, Elias Boone felt the weight of silence lift. In the days that followed, the town began to shift. Some held their judgment still, but others softened, respect growing for the man who had stood against scorn. Clara, once broken and cast aside, now stood with her head a little higher. And Elias, once bound to loneliness, found himself mending fences not just of wood, but of his own heart. One evening, as the sun poured gold across the horizon, Clara rocked the twins in their cradle, while Elias worked the fence nearby. The world was still, painted in light. Elias glanced toward her, and in that sight, her gentle hands, her quiet strength, he saw not survival alone, but life renewed. And to those who might one day hear this tale, let it be known, the world may break you, cast you down, and leave you in the dust. But sometimes all it takes is one steady hand, one act of courage, one heart that refuses to let go, to turn ruin into beginning. Love is not always loud nor grand. Sometimes it is found in the hush between breaths, in the building of a cradle, in the promise spoken not before crowds, but in the quiet where two souls meet. And maybe that is enough.